Oh, what?
I got bounced.
From the original. Saw your set for that Japanese play.
The bloody thing, you know.
Yeah, the actors, Joanne helped.
Nice to meet you. So you're the really pioneer in all senses. The pioneer generation.
Yeah, because it always happens when you press it, it doesn't.
I was not new to theater, but I was new to A-level exams. I was new to Asia. I was new to Singapore. And I didn't even know how to tell a Chinese girl's name from a Chinese boy's name. You know, I can remember, in many ways, the first practicals that we had, which were in the language lab, if you recall. And I can remember this group of students who looked lost and they were afraid to make eye contact, and they were all, the body language was, you know, very fragile, I'll say that, except for Lydia Luke, who came in with black tights, a black t-shirt, threw her dance bag down and said, "I'm here." But it was kind of a risk because, you know, Singapore is very exam oriented, as you all know, and your scores, everything is about scoring, and nobody had any past exams, including me. Nobody really knew what we were teaching. We were pioneering, I think for the first time in Singapore, a practical paper that didn't have a 12-year series ahead of it or behind it. And we didn't, I mean, this was really pedagogically very important.
Yes.
For the first time, students were examined on what they did and on their original work.
I didn't do it the first 2-3 months. I did history, and then Ray came to me and said, "What on earth are you doing history for?" And yes, and I'm like, he's like, "You should be doing theater." And then you sent me a set design. He said, "Read this book, do the set design, and draw." And then he said, "Okay, you're in." Yeah.
You're coached from the history.
Coached me in history. Yes.
Is that Kitty Menon?
No, it wasn't kidding. It was Mallinson. Keith Mallinson, yes.
But how did you know each other? Through literature or what?
No, because I was hanging around with the little kids.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're already showing
I
love.
was meant to showing it, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like me. I wasn't doing TSD until after about 3 weeks, and I only did it because I got kicked out of maths.
Good on you.
Just how came to me and said, "What? You didn't do A maths at O level. You cannot do C maths." So I had to drop the subject, and I was hanging out with the theatre kids, and I was like, "It's the kind of fun, can I join?" And there were no prerequisites, so alright.
You had interviewed each of us, right, before we came into the
I did in
course.
your year. I can't remember when I did that. The first year I did.
Yeah.
And, can I just, what about parents? How did your parents react?
They were confused.
Sorry, I'll just chime in now. For myself, coming to theatre studies actually, I went to Paya Lebar Methodist Girls' School, and for me, a big turning point was when I was 14 and I discovered literature. And my school used to do a library week thing where they would encourage the kids to go and do whatever they wanted. And so by the time, I think we got into Macbeth, so that was actually my favorite text. You know, weird, but like, so we did a musical version of Macbeth at school, which it was really hilarious. Like, you know, imagine, but we hammed it up, and you know, we did the whole Anthony speech as a song and kind of thing. So it was such good fun, and I never felt so engaged before. And I think from then I thought, oh gosh, I want to do something like that. I couldn't really put my finger on it. And then I heard a rumor. I didn't even read the paper. I heard a rumor that VJ had this course, you know, and I was like, oh. So maybe that's where I should go, and I guess I was the kind of personality that was like, that's just what's going to happen. And so my father was like really not happy about it, and I think my relatives all were, you know, and my parents were inundated with questions like, how is she going to make a living? No, she's going to be a bar girl. And in actual fact, the thing is, no one from my school went to VJ, so I turned up on the first day of school, the only one with a sad little white belt, you know, kind of thing. I don't know anybody here, and that was the only reason why I went to VJ. And everything else was a blur. That was what I was going to do. And even from bouncing from one class from I think A53 to all that was a blur for me because that was what I was going to do. Yeah. So it's kind of strange. Yeah, that memory.
I think me and Lux were in the next door class that was doing geography, and it was the opposite from hanging out with the theatre studies folks. We felt like we were a little bit really having to be part of the theatre studies because everybody else was in geography, and it was a bit of a decision of like, in the first 3 months you make your friends and you feel really bonded to them, and then there's the theatre studies people, and it was a little bit of trying to decide wanting it all. I think my parents didn't mind at the start, and for much of the same reason I decided to take theatre. I was in VJ in the first 3 months. It was the only school that offered. I didn't know where I would be after 3 months, right? Who knows, right? So I thought that, well, I would try it, and it was, I love literature, and it was a very engaging. It felt like things were alive, as opposed to just reading, and I got really into it. I think they started to get upset closer to the A-levels, though. Because it took up so much time, more time than every other subject combined, and that's when they started to get really, really upset. And my mother, I remember, she would actually wait outside the door and come home like close to midnight. She's like, you can't be at school. Obviously, you've been out doing something, I mean, yeah. I was at school because you were there too.
But there were times when you were with someone else.
Oh dear.
I think this is all.
Just smash your alibi. Edit book. What about you, Helmi? Yeah. How did you end up going to theatre?
I did theatre at Victoria School. And as in I acted and directed and wrote some plays, student plays. So it seemed like a natural extension.
Okay, I'm a very shy person, as you can tell. I truly am. Yeah, so but I always wanted to like sing, right? So that was my thing. So I thought if I had an opportunity to maybe sing, then I could do it and not study so hard. So that's why I chose TSD. But as you can tell, when I was in VJ, I was hardly ever in school, right? So you hardly saw me, and there were parts of me that was not willing to give away. You had this trust fall things. And I never could do it because I could never trust
Same
them.
here.
Right, I could
Same
never let
here,
go,
yeah,
right? Yeah, so, but through TSD, I think it kind of changed me a bit, even though I still can't do trust falls, but I'm learning to.
You know what you're going to do at the end of this?
No!
Samuel, come on. This is the moment. Come on, you couldn't script it any better.
No.
I'm going to transform you now.
Sam, you had a reputation, by the way.
As what?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember. One of your directors told me that when I had to write a role for Sam, he has to sing, dance, and look pretty. These are his prerequisites for the role that he will play.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And boy, you did.
And maybe now it'd be quite fun to hear how you guys came, because you obviously, by the time you guys started, TSD was around for a while now.
Yeah, okay, for myself, I was a triple science student, double maths in secondary school, and then I came to decide to do something different. Okay, let's do the arts. I don't want to be a doctor. So she was in front of the lecture theatre saying, who wants to do TSD? Come down now. So, okay, what is that? Okay, I come down. So I wrote my name, and then I went to the dance studio, and then, hey, didn't turn back after that. I so got stuck lah.
So you could do triple science and TSD?
No, I was in triple science in secondary school. Then I gave it up.
You were recruiting students from Mr. Buono.
No.
After you've been coaching history and then,
I taught after Mr. Bono.
okay.
I'm going to call Mr. Buono by all of you.
I have always, I don't know, you're my teacher, you always be my teacher. So.
I think you were Mr. B at some point.
Mr.
right?
B,
Yeah. Li Ting, what about you?
I came to, because I also did triple science with double maths in O-levels, and but I'm from Katong Convent, and I never got a chance to be part of the whole drama, because drama is a very big tradition in Katong Convent, but I never got a chance to be part of it. And so I realized across the canal, because VJ is separated from Katong Convent by a canal, I came down for an open house, and I saw Lofty in the space, Mr. Lofthouse, in the space with our senior batch were the year ones at that time. And they were doing something like lying on the floor and breathing and things like that. I could get used to doing this.
Giving each other massages.
Oh, yeah.
You know, wow, that's so amazing.
So then, yeah, I came to VJ with the intention of taking the studies and I never looked back.
Yeah.
Corrie? In secondary school, I always felt like I was the odd one out because I loved the arts. I loved it so much. I loved literature. When we first started studying Shakespeare, I was just, you know, there's still lines from Julius Caesar that I remember. But I was in a very sporty school. I went to SOTA Girls. And no one understood this strange love I had for this subject. I actually fought. I lobbied for SOTA Girls. It was the first time they had ever offered music as an O-level subject because I wanted to do it. Wow. So I took music at O-level. And then I was deciding which school I had to go to for junior college. And I was like, oh, I definitely want to do literature because I love it so much. And I live in the East, so I guess I'll go to Victoria Junior College. And I actually did not know they had a theatre program until the day before the open house. I was looking around online and I found this really terribly maintained theatre studies website. And I could not sleep the entire night because I was like, oh my god, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do theatre. I can't perform to save my life, but this is what I'm going to do. Wow. And so I did it. Yeah. I really could not sleep. I was so bleary-eyed the next day at the open house because I was like, theatre. And then I went for the same studio thing where they were like, and when I remember, one thing I remember was they turned out the lights, and I remember blackout curtains for the first time because I could not see anything in front of my face. I never seen anything so dark, you know, like the theater when it cuts out. And I still get that feeling when I go to the theater today when the lights go down. It's that magic, you know, that something is going to happen. So that's how I got to theater.
As you were saying, okay, you know, just from all that chit chat and hearing from everyone, I think one of the things I have to say is that in my time as the pioneer batch, now we were 89, class of 90, coming in 89, no internet. Theatre studies was offered as an A-level subject for the first time. The lay of the land was basically if you did arts, you were stupid, right? And then they, you know, so everybody tried to get into the triple science double maths class in secondary school, which I did. And then they started, it was weird that Ministry of Education had to lure people into the humanities by giving them scholarships. So I was like, great, you're giving me $2,000, I go to a school, I spent it on a second-hand electric guitar and a Super 8 camera because I always wanted to do film and theatre. And then all of a sudden, you know, reading in the Straits Times that this course was being offered. So my parents didn't know any better. Great, so I just went straight for that. And yeah, there was no turning back after that.
I remember that Super 8 camera.
Did you?
Yeah, because you went on to do stuff with it, right? Shakas and all that. Was it the
yeah,
same thing?
no, that was 16.
No,
yeah.
You've been with a lot of movie cameras since.
Yes, yes. And in fact, you gave me one of the first books on film.
Oh, really?
It was. You gave me one. I can't remember the title of it right now. Yeah.
I really didn't know. I mean, I got off the plane. I'd never been in Asia before. The ministry swept me up and brought me into to the ministry and signed all these papers, and I didn't read them quite carefully enough. I should have. But anyway, I mean, the first 6 months I was here, there was no TSD, and I was assigned to teach lit with a wonderful group, the 88 A11s. And meanwhile, I was also working with Alan Austin and with the ministry on shaping the syllabus, okay? And that was very interesting, because not only that, I'm an American, so I never had any idea about Cambridge A-levels. I didn't know what an A-level from a B-level. So anyway, we had these meetings, and I remember two things. One was when it came to the practical paper, and there was Cambridge had never done an A-level theater studies, right? So we were talking, and the ministry people said, oh, well, yes, the practical paper, they'll do scenes from Ibsen and Shakespeare and all of that, you know. And I had just had the most wonderful experience, which was I saw Ko Pao Kun's Mama Looking for Her Cat, which moved me terrifically. And I said, no, these students have to do original work. I mean, it's impossible do they do? And they said, oh, there's a lot of problems with that. Well, how will it be graded? All of this stuff, and then, there was a real argument about it. And finally, we won that argument. But then the next argument, and this was interesting, was the ministry said, well, okay, so now the students are doing original work. What if they say the wrong things? What if they offend the government? This was a real issue for the ministry, right? And I did some quick thinking, and I'm very proud of this. And I said, oh, no. They said, well, you, Mr. Buono, they said, you will review these scenes and you will make sure that everything is proper and, you'll censor them basically. And I said, I will not censor. And I said, the reason is because these students are doing A-levels in a British system and they'll be competing against students who have freedom of speech. And I said, the results will go down if they are censored. And Mrs. Lee said, yes.
So you press the kiasu button, essentially. Right, okay.
Oh, that was a stroke of genius.
And so, I think none of your work was ever censored, with a couple of small exceptions.
Well, so for the Pioneer Badge, the final, the exam pieces we did range from Tiananmen Square incident to a critique of the education system and pressure cooker. Right. It was quite, it was actually, I said, oh, I
Do you
thought
have
about
those
Singapore.
scripts? Because those are the only ones I don't have. Of all of them, I forgot to collect those scripts.
I have no idea. You need to.
On that, I can still remember Kelvin Tong. They did a Tiananmen Square skit. And I walked out of the college and he was lying on the road in Marine Parade. And I said, what the hell are you doing? He said, I'm trying to see what it was like to be a Chinese student facing
Dedication.
Didn't you have to play a woman who was raped? Was that you or Wyman?
Wyman.
Wyman.
I was the
right.
mama's son.
Yes. So we had a play where one of the characters was a woman who had been raped before by a Japanese soldier.
Yeah.
And so in our effort to
in a very Stanislavski
we
I don't want to hear this.
We put her in a room and then we had a male actor well, not all the way, of course, but to at least torment her to some degree. But yeah, we're made to think like adults very quickly, even though we were 17 and 18, and that was really, I think that was really important.
Can I have one memory of that same group?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you remember the clown work I gave you?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Point to the top.
Yes.
Point to the top. I played part of being a clown is relating to an authority figure. And you have to do what the authority figure says, and you're always wrong. And you wear a clown nose, and and I remember, especially you, Helmi, I thought you were going to kill me after that. You were so angry. But that was an amazing exercise, I remember.
Didn't you throw a shoe at him?
Yes, I threw a
Yes.
shoe. I don't know.
No, Helmi threw a shoe at you.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, right, he threw a shoe.
Yes.
Yeah, speaking of authority, I think one of the sort of eye-opening incidences in VJ TSD was the frequent moments when you came into class and you would complain to us about how you just had an argument with the principal. And believe it or not, that was the first time I saw like authority arguing with authority, and that kind of made me realize that. There were always many sides to an argument, to an opinion, and no one was necessarily right. Because, when you grow up in the Singapore education system, the teacher was always right. But here were two teachers, or one principal and one teacher arguing with each other, and my teacher was sharing this, this whole argument with us, and it made me think like in larger terms, and that was important to me.
No, I'm just thinking that, if, I suppose, I just think how extremely privileged it was for, like myself, and my cohort to have just strolled very leisurely into this course, not knowing what was before us, and just having it all laid out before us without having to fight for for something like that. We've not had to fight to be able to have a voice, fight to have alternative perspective, and I think that's what Mr. Buono, Mr. Austin, and actually that the school was able to provide. And having just had that already, we just never assumed that would be different for anyone else. For me, I'm thinking about that, because then after which, moving into other courses, taking pursuing film and TV and university and all that, it just became obvious that yes, of course you can have different perspectives. Of course you can the different hues and shades, and that it was such a privilege. I mean, looking back, if you think about all the other people struggling in commerce or science now, that's a lot worse.
Yeah. No, but I think I think you made a very good point about thinking about issues and being young and actually finding that you have the capacity to think of these issues. Because at school, quite often you go through a routine and these are the grades you're supposed to achieve, and no slur on math and science because they're important in their own right. Yeah, and you study them. But at the same time, like, I remember it is literature and it is theatre studies. I think we did. I did a role of the Tempest of the Shrew for one of the monologue pieces that we did do. And of course that makes you think of the wider issues, domestic abuse, power struggles between relationships, all these things that you kind of maybe know happen in society, but you don't really think about it directly. And we were, had to ask ourselves, what does this feel like? What, how difficult is this? And then what does it mean to pull yourself together after something like that? So I think it actually made me realize that we have the capacity, even at a young age, to think about these things seriously, to have informed opinions, and maybe opinions that can be challenged further down the line some more, but that's nothing wrong. I think that's the whole point. You are engaged with it rather than just pretending it never happened, And I think that for me was really profound in that sense,
There were a lot of things that opened my eyes. For one thing, Rey didn't just teach theatre, he also taught us, he gave us a background in art history. And so we saw images that we otherwise would not have seen, like David's statue, and what else did you read in class?
Guernica, I remember.
Yeah,
Guernica, yes.
Yeah, so that was before the internet came along, right? I mean, kids today will have access to all kinds of images, but back then we didn't, and that opened our eyes.
I think that is very true, because the readings that we did were really quite new for me. Bragg, for example, and especially in a place where we don't have art history taught at all. It was one. In fact, I think now I think about it, now that Helmi's brought it up, it was really the only opportunity we would have had to critical theory. That at least critical theory that is also being talked about and accessible to in other parts of the world. So I think that's been really, more and more in my work, it's become useful and more apparent that way, especially because I work so much with exhibition culture, and a lot of curators have background now in theater and performing arts, or so this theory is something that I've been going back to more and more, actually.
And we're being thrown in the deep end. The first play I think I studied was Hedda Gabler, which is about feminism.
Yeah.
And after that, there was Waiting for Godot, and
pretty mind-blowing.
It was mind-blowing to be able to see plays be like that.
And to be 16, 17, to actually question the very reason for existence, and that challenged everything you knew about life. And I think being in the studio was a very safe space for young people to actually push those boundaries, to challenge assumptions, and to know that life is not so black and white, and lots and lots of grays.
That's what theatre is,
Yes.
right? That safe space.
So theatre, for me, it was really about life. It really wasn't about learning how, it was that, learning how to put out play and all that, but I think it was teaching me about life.
I think the safety is very important in any creative situation, but especially in Singapore, because there's so many dangers in a way, and so many things that you can't say. And one of the things I remember in many classes was that people said them, and when they said them, it was painful. And sometimes we would be there until 8 o'clock at night because somebody was sobbing so much, having said something that was really important. And we all stayed with that person, no matter what it took, until they had whatever, got back up off the floor. And I think that's really important in this place especially.
Actually, I'm curious, when they first put out that call that they were going to establish this A-level course, what did the ministry tell you was their purpose?
Well, I was hired in Boston. I was teaching in North Carolina, School of the Arts. And as I said, the snow was up to here in Boston, and they were telling me about the weather in Singapore. And I thought, well, I'll go to Asia for a couple of years and then come back, you know, to the States. And I mean, I didn't know anything really because Alan had done the groundwork, Alan Austin, to get permission to do it. But then when I got here, you know, first of all, I was in this junior college. I said A-levels. I had no idea what that meant. Everyone was in a uniform. They were all doing this or whatever it was. And this is this. And you know, I mean, I was like, oh. And then there was Mrs. Lee. That's a whole other. As I said many times, Singapore had PM Lee, and we had Lee PM. You know. But I mean, for me, the real introduction was the meetings with the ministry, where I really had to learn what it meant to answer an A-level question and what it meant, and then I kind of had to adopt my old teaching methods to that system. It took 6 months before this course started. Until before that, I taught Shakespeare.
But what did they articulate when they said, the objectives of this is we're trying to produce citizens which are who are, you know?
There was really very little talk about that. There was talk about how much weight and how many points this question should have, how many points this station should have, and Alan had done a kind of thing where there would be 1/3 practical, and then there would be I never understood the unseen passage. They had an unseen passage. And I didn't know what the hell that was there for. I remember that. And then we got the theater history into it, the 2 periods and all that. But we never really talked about citizenship or anything. When I sold the course, I sold it on the basis that it would make you a better person, that even if you didn't go into theater, you would get life skills that would be important. I had the 5 C's, creativity, collaboration, courage was one of them. I can't remember, but they were all like
great package.
and I did. If I'm talking too much, Annie, tell me.
Don't worry.
Okay. But one of the things I think I said in my interview, I can still remember the first year you guys were there, and the Perm Sec for Education came to VJC to do a grand tour, you know, and everybody had to do something to impress him. It was like Professor Houtman's performing dogs. And I had you guys in the studio, and you were all in black, and you were doing mirrors, lying on the floor, gibberish, and all this. And I opened the door, you know, and he looks in at this zoo. And he said, "What is this?" You know, and I said, "Well, this is the Theater Studies and Drama course, and what are they doing?" "Oh, well, they're experimenting with physical theater." I forget what I said, you know, bullshit. And then he said, "How many students do you have?" And I said, "Well, we have 15, and we hope to grow the program, but you know, at this point, it's very good numbers for the first year and the second year." And he looked at me, he's 15, huh? He said, "Well, in 20 years, that should be enough." He said, "You know, we will only need about 15 people in theater in 20 years. You know, he was thinking of jobs and all of that. And, you know, that was the whole, I remember saying to people, you know, now Singapore makes the video tape recorders, but one day they have to learn to make the videotapes themselves. And, you know, here we are, right?
Mine I'm very proud of. He said it's one of the top 5. It's called Children of the Pear Garden.
Yes.
Whoa. Awkward silence. Children of the Pear Garden was, it was Brechtian in many ways, and we also had like Chinese opera elements. So I remember my job was to write the music for the songs that we were singing. So we were all doing our own masks. So I was playing the Hua Tan, the Chinese opera female singer. So I had to write all the songs, and Janice Ko was the Wu Dan, and then we also had the Fool, who was the Xiao Chou, right? So we had all these people who were going on, and we were on Stanley, right? Yes, and there was then we were Kayleen was the director, and she was quite horrible. And,
and that's why she directs the theatre now. Theatre directors.
Yeah, but it was telling of the journey of actors who at that time were not very well respected, and it resonated with me because all the time I'm so shy, because ever since I was young, you always felt as if you were a bit different from other people, and then at that time when you're different, you're really very different. Shut up. Okay. Then when you went into like theatre and you realized that in school you were also the least favoured nation kind of person, so you always felt as if you were a bit out from other people. So it impacted me quite a bit. So when we did Children of the Pear Garden, to very much acclaim, when I started my legal practice, one of the first things I wanted to do was to give the artistic world a voice. You know, because we are always so downtrodden. So I really wanted to like help. So today I feel as if I'm doing my best to try to help the theatre scene in my way, even though I'm not performing anymore, unless you call this a performance.
Is that another cue for a class?
I think you made a point there. I think Sam made a really good point underneath all the jokes, because I'm working on this Theatre Memories project, and one of the things that came out from all the interviews was how, of course, everything started on a more amateur level, people sort of working together, and then as things start to become more like an industry, like money starts coming in. But even then, it was still very hard for actors to be protected, to have the right kind of pay. Even when they work really hard, even though they said they're getting paid, and then getting paid was still another level. So I think there are some very important issues that you're touching upon there.
I mean, apart from, across a decade, there was like internet, all this newfangled invention.
That much.
But I don't think it changed. Even now that I'm teaching TSD, nothing much has changed. I think we are still so-called counterculture. We even say some of the teachers doing that cult we're teaching that cult that box.
Black t-shirt.
Black t-shirt or black around barefoot one.
How would you?
Yeah. So I think going back to what Annie asked, what was my memory of my group piece? I think that's what it's called. It's we staged a piece. I can't remember. Goodness. It's a science piece at the science lab. I think you had a lot of trouble going through that administratively, trying to, because our piece was in the science lab. Yeah.
Performed in the
science lab. So it was
very site specific.
Very site specific.
Everywhere else in Seoul.
So the only way that we could rehearse was only on Saturdays and Sundays. So we climbed into the college on Sundays just to go and break into the science lab to rehearse.
It's good old TSD tradition.
Yes, and I hope we didn't get her into trouble and Lofty into trouble, but the piece turned out very nice because we had levels of second level, and then we played in the little garden that's in front of the science lab. We played inside the science lab.
It was actually a very dystopian piece.
Yes, it's a dystopian piece.
I think it's a Brave New World.
Brave New World.
I remember your group name, Ikan Village.
Yeah, we were called Ikan Village.
But I can't remember your piece name.
Oh yeah, building blocks. Yes, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
So we were questioning the idea of authority, trying to recreate individual, recreating society, and how everybody was so mechanized into forming into what industry they're supposed to work.
Robots.
Yeah, we're all robots, and then we subvert the whole thing that the scientists were actually robots, and the robots were actually it's complex. Yeah.
I think our year favoured site-specific pieces. So we did a piece about elderly abandonment, and our group had a lot of problems prior to that because we were very conceptual. We were all like kind of very cerebral people, and an earlier incarnation which I just reread this morning, everyone was like a certain concept. Someone was called logic. I was called heart rate. It was awful. It was terrible. A few weeks before our prelim, we were completely stumped because we had nothing. It's so we were in school, we were all lying on the road, like just spent with frustration. And then one of my group members started poking at the mango tree outside the canteen. And we said, we are going to do a piece at this mango tree, but what will it be about? And we decided we would be a group of old people who meet every year at this mango tree to exchange stories. But and what we did, I think, it was very funny because it's quite intuitive. But now that I interview groups like the Necessary Stage, we were actually devising. You know, we went out, we talked to the elderly people in the neighborhood in Marine Parade. We asked them what, because we were all alone. We were just all alone at coffee shops. So we asked them, why are you living by yourself? You know, we were just weird teenagers. We just go and talk to the elderly people, and we came back to the studio and we cried because everyone was just alone. You know, kind of left to their own devices. So we created a piece about these 5 old people, and we had like cars coming in and bicycles, and it was a massive like.
That was that epic. Corrie made an epic,
Yeah.
almost 10-minute entrance
On a wheelchair.
Wheelchair, all the way. So for like 10 minutes, you didn't know what the hell was going on, and then from far you saw Corrie coming.
Yeah. And my father was so against me doing theatre. He was like, what are you doing? Are you treating your house like a hotel? You know, you're just coming home at midnight. What are you doing? And then finally, after 2 years of just struggling with him, he watched this performance, and I could hear him laughing because it was very funny, and then it got very sad because everyone left and they're all alone. At the end of the whole thing, we all leave, and then you realize the tree is going to be cut down, and you're not going to be able to come back to this tree next year, and the physical heritage is completely gone. And then my father was like, I know what you're doing now. And he has always been an engineer. His whole life he's been an engineer. He was head of Singapore Poly's architecture and built environment school. And 2 years ago, he became director of the School of Arts and Social Sciences. Very yeah. So I think that's one of like, you know, I think I was so relieved when my father came and he watched this performance. But you know, now that I look back, you know, 5 teenagers acting as old people is probably terrible. You know, it's probably a terrible idea. But I think, you know, it did something. Yeah.
I mean, the kind of things that we came up with. I think I put one of my classmates into a box about that size. It's like get
Oh boy, I remember that.
It's like you stay inside there while everyone's clapping.
That was Fendi.
No. That was actually Jerry Lee.
Oh, Jerry
Lee. Yeah. Fendi was the other student. Yeah, but he remembers the show too. Yeah.
There's been I've heard the word counterculture come out like 3 or 4 times already. I have a slight problem with that word because I don't think it sounds as if we're butting heads with something, and for me I don't like that idea because I don't like the idea that I'm rebelling against something. For me, I feel like theatre made me pro-life and pro-diversity and pro-ideas, and that if someone has a problem with it, it's because this person don't embrace these ideas of diversity and
I mean, yeah, there are challenges within the classroom, and there are challenges beyond the classroom, and you know, there are a lot of things to talk about. I mean, I think one of the things I realized right away with your batch was there was a tremendous range of English-speaking ability. So there were some very articulate kids, and there was some so for the first few months, or maybe the first month, all we did was physical theater and didn't use words very much, and then we introduced gibberish, and then so there was a kind of, and then the other thing was the cultural challenge, because everybody was you know, pretty much culturally didn't know very much because they'd been to Singapore's secondary schools. And there, I went the opposite way, and I threw you all into the deep end. You know, I said, you know, let's talk about Brecht, you know, or let's talk about Greek theater or whatever. And I didn't patronize you. I didn't spoon feed you at all. And I really, especially the first couple of years, I didn't know whether that was going to work or not. So within the classroom, and of course then there was also as all of you have mentioned, the tremendous build to the exams, and you know, the amount of time you were spending in jumping through the fences and working on Saturdays. And you know, I mean, I had to kind of run interference with all the authorities in the school, you know. And you know, sometimes Mrs. Lee, if she was in a bad mood, could be very harsh. So you know, there was, you know, Mr. Bono, they left a mess out in front of the theater, you know, Or, you know, they were climbing the fence, and depending on who the assistant principal was, that was also important. So then there was all of that, you know, and then occasionally there was pressure also from the outside, from the government kind of thing. In fact, as everybody knows, I got kicked out of this island. But no, that's another story. But you know, the government was watching the whole thing, and I kind of began to realize this through the thing. But you know, there was somebody, remember timekeeping from the ministry, holding up cards and saying time.
Yeah.
They were taking notes on everything, and it all ended up, you know, they knew exactly what all of you were doing and what these pieces were about, and so, you know, and that kind of occasionally, especially during the Necessary Sage thing in '94, that came back on the course a bit. And in fact, that was the year they decided they didn't need me anymore, although I stayed until '96 and '97. So, you know, it's a very odd kind of thing. And, you know, I could go into specific, like, I've got lots of Lee Kui Mun stories and stuff like that. I don't know if you're interested in those.
Maybe later.
Later. But, you know, I mean, in a sense, and also even Alan Austin would sometimes land on me. I remember we did, oh, what was it? It was the first year. We did these short scenes, 24 hours.
Yes.
And there was one about, it was very sexual, where she was cutting a carrot. I don't remember. It was obvious one. And how dare you put Junior, these are children. You know, I got that from Alan.
Mr. Austin.
So, you know, how can you have them doing this kind of stuff? And a lot of people were offended. And some people were offended by the work, even, you know, that you did. So.
Yay, we did something right.
And again, I don't think it was meant to be counterculture. But the idea that, you know, and you all heard me say this, acting is telling the truth with a straight face.
Yeah.
And sometimes the truth can make people uncomfortable.
But in that sense, I agree with, wholly agree with Helmi, you know, not using the choice of words, not using the word counterculture, but that idea that it's multiple cultures, allows for that diversity of narratives. And I think that was very, I mean, that was very fresh for that time. I mean, and then look at where we are now at SOTA. But at the same time, you know, we're here doing this dialogue at the School of the Arts, but I think we all know, particularly if you work in, you know, in the arts, or you just keep your eyes open, that you don't take these things for granted. You know, sometimes it's like one step forward, 3 steps back. Mm-hmm. It keeps shifting and moving and sliding, and it takes a lot of active, you know, of standing up. And I think that's what I mean, you did give us an environment where it gave us a safe space. You fought those battles so that we didn't have to even know that it was a privilege to be able to
And I also let you argue with me.
Yes.
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 Yeah, and I think it was such a, I don't know, I mean, if you think about it, considering the kind of secondary schools we came from, but you made it so comfortable, you know, it wasn't alien.
That safe space you're talking about.
Yeah.
Those are important to us. Yeah. And then we come out into the world and realize it ain't safe. It ain't safe.
Is it safe? Is it safe?
Actually, one of the other challenges that I wanted to sort of mention, which is slightly on a slightly different tack as well, was that when we just came out of TSD, some of us formed different groups. You know, I think Theatre People was one group. There's another group called Little Bird Theatre, and we started to do theatre projects outside. And I think one of the things that, you know, come to mind when I think about that was that first, like, it wasn't that difficult then to do these amateur shows, because I actually through the course of doing this other project, I ran into Heng Lun from Drama Box, and he actually reminded me about like some of the theatre shows he had seen at the substation, and he was, oh, that's the toilet, and I'm like, you remember all this? He turns out that he was he was working.
Love is another stranger.
Exactly, yeah. He was working as I think the lighting or tech person then. But then and he said, of course, then it was easy. It was only like $1,000 for a week's run. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. There's not a difficult thing to pay and also break even. And even back then, it was sort of like, how do you furnish a set? The expectations were lower. So I think basically I just cleaned up my mother's living room and put it there, and then returned it back in the fish lorry, smelling something weird. But So the challenges were quite different. But the other challenge that was true was that after I finished theatre studies here, I wasn't quite sure where I was going to go here in Singapore. I think now I was reminded that NUS theatre studies just started, but they were it was a very new curriculum and maybe a little bit more academic, and I wasn't sure that was what I wanted to do. But I didn't really know what my path would be after that, so I went overseas to study. But even then, like after I got my degree, there was always some uncertainty, like, should I come back to Singapore, should I work? Is there actually an industry that could support like a living?
I came from both. I went to NUS Theatre Studies after BJ, and it was a culture shock. Like, I can't even describe. There were basically less than half of the courses at NUS were practical courses. And theatre studies, no matter how we have to do an A-level paper, we were always sort of working practically. You know, even if we had lectures, we got a bit practical, everything was hands-on learning. And then coming to NUS was like, what is this, right? But it then sort of filled in the gaps a little bit. But I always tell the story because we were introduced to Brecht in VJ, and I loved it. And then there was a course in NUS which was about acting, it was a comparison between Stanislavski and Brecht, which is exactly what we did, right? Kind of, we were learning both. And I went back to my A-level notes. My A-level notes were better than my notes that I got in NUS. And I was sharing those notes with my NUS classmates because they were better. So yeah, but theatre studies kind of just, at NUS was almost 100% academic. You had to do a production at the end. And I ended up, because I had gone through VJ, because I had, after VJ, started volunteering, I ended up sort of being the only person who really had any production experience. Everyone else there was kind of, I'm trying to pick this up along the way, I don't know what I'm doing. So, if anything, VJ really prepares you for that, right? But you lose that sense of freedom to play. I was quite disillusioned when I came out from NUSTS, because I was like, is this the future of theatre here? I was very sad. Because it was like, I don't know what exactly you're trying to teach me. You're giving me all these theories, but you're not giving me a space to apply these theories, and the mismatch was too much for me. Yeah. So, yeah. Right? I mean, you didn't even get to do it.
No, I mean, that's why I'm coming back to what Mr. Buono was saying, is having fought to establish and protecting that space for the students to originate work. I think that was critical. I think that is probably the crux of what made the theatre studies program so different, and the graduates, from that so different, was that idea that you could have your original voices, and that the process of devising the pieces, that was so much of the growing. So thank you so much for that. And Mr. Austin.
I think what was interesting about the TSD course which I got from VJ was the idea of creating that safe space. And then I brought to my teaching as well, teaching my own TSD course. So just I think a couple of weeks back, my principal asked me, what are you doing with your students? My student want to do this golden age of pornography in America. So she wanted to do this, she wanted to be naked on stage and frolic and what was what.
Kids these days!
Yeah, so my first instinct is, okay, hold your horses first. Let's talk academic first. What issues you want to talk about with the student? And then I had to face the principal. And the principal asked, oh, what's your student doing? Why doing this porn stuff, all this woman, all these naked bodies, all that? Then I said, oh, she's going through this academic work. And you as a teacher, why don't you stop? Then I said, my job is not to stop creativity. My job is to break the red tapes for her so that she can explore everything that she needs and have that safe space in an environment that she can actually thrive. Because outside, I don't think she will have that ability to explore this. I think when she goes into the working world, I don't think she is even able to do all this creative work. Even in theatre in Singapore, you are constantly being talked down by MDA. No, let's submit your script by this, and even then it's slightly challenging. You won't get a grant for this, but here giving you some money to explore this idea that you have, this inner burning desire, and okay. And my job as a facilitator is to break the red tapes and to fight the fire for you when it comes.
I think it's interesting to see how Mr. Buono created a very safe environment for his students. And then when Joe took over with Lofty, you get the same sense, oh, wow, we can come here, and then now, so it's nice to see that intergenerational thing being.
Yeah, the conversations get carried on from just the first pioneer batch, and then now that we are carrying on to many different pockets, a different nucleus of ideas.
I mean, some of us were chatting just now about how sometimes a lot of the anxiety that goes around the larger picture of, you know, the policy making and the administration of, you know, the arts in Singapore and funding and all that, and that, you know, we were just chatting just earlier about, oh, it's sustainability, and here we see it's been intergenerational, that if you're going to talk about sustainability, you're going to talk about philosophy, and that, you know, that it's, you know, we can, I mean, just from chatting here, you get a sense of that lineage, you know, and it's hard fought. You know, what do we need to do outside of the school system, what to make sure that, you know, that this can, there's that space.
I think it's true. I was quite lost after finishing my A-levels and theatre studies for many reasons. But yeah, I mean, the good, bad things. I think the tricky thing is true. I think because of theatre studies, I did not do very well at A-levels. And my grandmother, who is not educated, was absolutely devastated. She's like, what are you going to do with your life? There was this moment, those few months, I was not sure I could go on to university, actually. Yeah. my grandmother was devastated. And that really made me ask myself, like, I mean, what next with this arts thing? You know, like, you love it, but what do you do with it here? But on the other side, talking about growing and opening the space, I don't think it was just a safe space, but I really began to think a lot more on so many levels. One, of course, the academic part being introduced to, say, Greek theatre, but in our own project, we started to look at things like wayang kulit and things like that for our project, but also working with other people outside. The theatre scene was very, very young then. It was very easy to do projects. We were doing things at Substation, at Seow Theatre. It was very easy to get the kind of support. And then I was able to do internships for Arts Festival and work with international groups. And that really, I mean, you got the sense there was really more outside. And I didn't go and do that much work more in theatre after a few more years, after university. But then I decided to go into the visual arts. And I think that the theatre background did play a big role in how I developed my own ideas, especially thinking about audiences, thinking about displays, thinking about installations, and I think maybe audiences more than anything, that's something that I still work on a lot. And also the practical things about the art scene in Singapore, not just about theatre, but when you set up a show in a gallery, you really do everything. Yeah. And as the curator or even the artist, you do everything from scratch, and it's not just like an idea. So many things come into it that I think that the theatre studies program was very important in laying that foundation for all these things that came.
I mean, one of the pioneer batches, Shen Tan, who was one of Singapore's premier chefs, and a restaurant is a performance, an art gallery is a court of law. Is also and a poetry reading, or even being a poet, I mean, it has elements of performance, and I think that's why the course is branched out so much, and why people are successful in other fields.
I think there are some qualities that having experience in theatre gives you that maybe is not as common as in other roles. Maybe film, it's different, but is that, you know, I remember when we were doing these shows, and within the course as well as just after the course, you also got the sense that when things were going not so well, you know, when there's a moment where you're like, oh dear, this is not going to be good, right? Oh God, you know, we can't get this or something, and then you think, oh dear, we've got 2 weeks, and then, you know, and it's like, and you have this kind of moment where you have actually question yourself, should we just pull out, you know, should we just get our 50% deposit, but, you know, should we just, and then you realize, no, we're going to do it. You know, we're going to do it. It may not be good, but we're going to do it anyway. Or then something comes up, like something gets broken. No, it's fine. We'll find a solution. And you just stick to it. And everyone, you know, whether it's you pulling that long 48-hour stretch that you don't have any sleep, or you are like wanting to kill each other, and then you come out of it together. But actually, it gets done. You know, and that I think is a quality that I really thank TSU for, because it's a kind of thing that even now when we do work, when things go rough, you think, no, we'll get it done. You know, it's kind of that I don't know, commitment to it, something.
The show must go on.
Yes.
Okay, let's just talk about the A levels because I teach the A levels data studies program now. The syllabus has changed from the ones that we did, where it was 40% practical, 60% theory. Now it flipped. 60% practical, 40% theory. But then they had to slot in this academic paper called critical commentary, where you need to do it in academic citation. So you have to do a 2,500 word essay over a period of time based on your IS. So you do puppetry, or you do a DS, for instance. You have to bring in critical theories, you have to bring in performance theory. So it's divided into 3 components: directorial vision, performance theory, and creative process. So they have to make it, so the ministry have to make it very clear. But I think it's a good process to go through for an artwork to come to fruition. But I think that's the fun part, where we just play around with ideas, and we are given more weighting to the A-level grade. So, and nothing much has changed. The examiner will still fly down from Cambridge and then every July and watch the performance, and then in November we'll sit for the 3-hour paper. So the syllabus pretty much has been quite comfortable, and because we're also reviewing currently, I'm also part of the reviewing committee for the current syllabus. So we are reviewing to downsize certain things, because apparently it is quite taxing for the current students. I don't know why, but they think, the ministry thinks that, okay, TSD is actually a very, it's too much for our current students to take. So, but I'm thinking it's not too much. Back then we did 6 tags, now they're only doing 4 tags, and then they are doing the same thing. So they want to cut down unseen, they want to cut down certain things, and they want to simplify. I said, no, why simplify certain things that makes us much more rigorous and robust. So it's still in process, and we're still in argument with Cambridge and MOE and SEAD and whatnot.
Perhaps they want to cut down because theatre students spend an inordinate amount of time working on theatre at the expense of everything else.
But that's the argument, right? They spend so much time. It's just like doing mathematics. You do homework. The only time that we can do homework is in the black box.
Yes.
Yeah. So you cannot bring the black box home. You have to go to the black box. So that's why the school think that, oh, why you spend so much time with the students? Because that they cannot bring their craft work home. They cannot bring the group home into their bedroom and under the blanket and do their practice.
Very little is an individual kind of work.
It's all group.
It's all group, yeah.
On that note, this is a true story. There was one student, I don't think I'll give her name, but she was particularly beloved of Miss Lee because she was president of the Students' Council. And
we know that, student.
Okay, and she had really 2 personalities. One was when she was calling the college to attention, and the other was the bohemian atmosphere of the TSD room. And she took 4 subjects. She was a humanities scholar. She took TSD, Lit, Economics, and History. And Mrs. Lee loved her, I mean, to the point where she never even acknowledged that she was a TSD student. She would send Jency to the math lecture theater to get her. But anyway, her results came out, and she had A for TSD, A for literature, B for history and economics, and I got blamed. Oh no, she worked too hard on field study. That's why her other. And by the way, the head of history, I won't name her, agreed with Mrs. Lee. And so as a result, I did a statistical analysis of the entire arts cohort, giving points for A's and B's and seeing all the results. And the results were that the TSD students did slightly better than the mean of the rest of the arts cohort. They were above the median. And the course that brought down results was math. I presented that, and it made absolutely no difference.
You know, I had the same sort of trouble, of course, right? About bringing everything down, and so I think it probably is your batch that I said, you please
get the prizes for every single subject. Make sure that
Oh,
GP,
yeah.
literature,
We
geography,
did though.
everything.
Yeah, Corrie was like, Corrie was
She was
like,
the top student, and they just swapped a whole lot of prizes for every single humanities subject, including math, I think.
yeah,
Yes,
I
including
think so.
math,
I
yes.
think so.
So every single prize winner was a theatre student that year.
Nice.
Yeah.
What did she say?
That batch was already not, but we made sure that every year it was like that.
Oh, great.
So you just jolly well good and get the top prize for GP, you know.
Draconian, yeah, that's what I do now. So
Yes.
the draconian, you
So
don't,
that
you
nobody
don't-
has anything
yeah.
to say.
Why do they always view theatre studies with suspicion? Even now, I don't.
There is no subject that forces the student to question and to challenge.
I
To
think it-
think for yourself.
And to think for yourself.
Oh my God,
really.
think for yourself.
Actually, the first class that you and Lofty did. So can you imagine all these students who had just come out of secondary school education, with like sheep, right? Just regurgitating answers and finished O levels. We all came into this room, and they said, if you don't have any questions for us, we're leaving.
Yes, I remember.
We panicked because none of us were accustomed to saying,
What is this class about?
What is this about?
Nobody was going to say anything.
we just sat
Yeah,
there in
great.
silence and completely stunned. And then they said, we're going. We're like, no, wait, we have questions.
I love that. I
Yeah,
love that.
so we asked some questions and then they were like, okay, we'll stay. Of course, continue.
But I mean, it's also true that theater has always been in that position more than any other art. Going back to ancient Greece, going back to Plato, who banned actors from the
Yes.
Republic. You know, I mean, in the Republic, and of course the Puritans, and it goes on. And I mean, there's always this distrust of theater. I think because one of the things theater makes you do is become another person. So, for example, Samuel could become this beautiful Chinese opera queen.
Could become.
Yes.
Yes.
No, but I mean, seriously, that's very threatening because it makes you cross gender lines, it makes you cross thought lines, it takes you out, and people no longer know who you are in a way. And I think, and then, unlike film, the audience is in the same room with it. So there's no way to escape the communication. I don't want to give a history lecture, but I think, you know, Singapore being a kind of perfect society where everyone knows their place and everyone does their job, and then you have a bunch of people who don't know their place and do a lot of jobs. That's very scary to authority. Mrs. Lee loved the choir because the choir had one leader and everybody sang in harmony.
I have a question for the educators. How much was Singapore work a component in what you teach? Let's say, you know, work by Harishama or, you know, Tanha or Kobakun, any of the, you know, sort of so-called classic Singapore works that are very well received, you know, how are they taught in curriculum within the framework of, you know, Western canon and Greece and all that?
I don't know about but the SOTA syllabus is such that it's IB, so there are no texts. So you teach whatever you want, and you actually get the students to experience a whole range. So they're 6 years of theatre, so we do everything Asian, Western. They are trained in No, in Suzuki, in Katakali, Wayang, Kulit, the whole lot. And then we do a lot of local texts, and we bring these practitioners because most of us know these people, so you bring them in to talk to the kids. So, you know, you could be reading a text by Alfian and then listening to Alfian talk about why he wrote that text. Yeah, so we try to do that because, and they try to do their research papers, their extended essays, which is like a 4,000 word essay. We try to get them to go as local as they could because they have a range of primary resources and interviews they can do. Yeah.
I saw a production of, I don't know which year it was last year, of Galileo. They did the necessary stages. They did the interpretation of that. That was really quite good.
Similarly for the A-levels, although the paper 1, which is the theory paper, is still very world theatre, but Singapore is not parked under world theatre. we have this compulsory component called modern theatre and then traditional Asian theatre, which somehow has always been Japanese. For the past few years, has always been Japanese. So I've always asked, when is the Singapore text coming in? When is the Singapore text coming in? But SAB will say, there's not much literature has been written about it. Not much secondary resources, secondary readings. Yeah, correct. Yes, you see, that is the frustration. We have, but they say, oh no, it's not published by Harvard, it's not published by Cambridge, it's not published by so and so, what and so. Okay, yeah, fair enough. So, okay, let's...
No, not fair enough.
Yeah,
not fair enough.
Fair enough because it's Cambridge International Examination. Fine, you want to brand name it. So then we'll take in
so
the
that's the
local
next task, is that we need to get it.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah,
texts.
so
Well,
there was a year that I brought in Robert Yeo though, the year
yeah,
before
for
you.
us.
So one year back
And
home, was it the
The one, yeah. So I,
Singapore Trilogy.
yes, I was so happy. I was like, no, we're gonna do this Singaporean play, and then came, you know, MOE or whatever. They said yes, go ahead, do that, and then I got into so much trouble.
Really?
Yes.
But one year back home is quite.
Because it's very, very political, very
Yeah.
political, the play. And then after that, of course, I was so innocent and naive. I invited Robert Yeo to come and talk to the theatre students, right? And like any good theatre teacher, invite the playwright. And then like, why did you invite him? What is the deal here? And then it became all very, you know, sort of, you know.
Are you trying to support?
What are you trying to do here? And then I
But you know,
got
for
brought
everything
in,
that you
yeah.
said, that you know, their anxieties might be about theatre, are exactly the kind of things that we do need more of now in Singapore in this climate where, you know, there's all these kind of insecurities about what's our place in Singapore now. And that's what theatre does. It gives you that safe space to deal with these issues, to know there's other possibilities, and know to be able to stand in somebody else's shoes and see from another perspective. It feels like all the more we need theatre, all the more we need humanities, now more so than ever. And I think we were having this chat before that, and I was kind of curious also about how many of us might have done literature in secondary school, or, you know, in the drama club, you know. But what I keep telling everyone, so Janice, who's the second batch of theatre studies at VJ, Janice Cole was the arts NMP just one cohort ago. And I think the best thing that she ever did, I tell everyone this, that she did in Parliament, was to raise this, the topic and the concern about whether literature is, you know, there's the opportunity to offer literature as an exam subject in secondary school, because the statistics were within 1 decade from, I think 1923 to in 10 years leading up to 2013. I think the numbers were something like, it went from 17,000 students, about 17,000 students taking literature as an O-level subject. It dropped to 3,000.
There's actually a reason to that.
Well, they say they combine.
Because at a point of time, the ranking of the colleges or the ranking of the schools is based on mean subject grade. So, and the MSG. So this MSG, they always take the best subject. And literature has always been...
You can't memorize.
Yeah, you can't memorize.
There's no perfect score.
Yeah, there's no perfect score, because literature offers a very different MSG. Then they said, okay, we cannot put it inside, so let's not offer. So school leaders decide, okay, let's not offer.
It became an elective.
Yeah, it became an elective. So schools stopped offering literature because it's hard to get an A1, A2, but if students will get B3, so that's still okay. But they have. It is not rankable. So those schools that offer lit will be lower in the rank. So the top elite schools will just say school lit, and then we'll go up the ranks.
No, please.
No, I was just wondering, but what about theatre studies? That doesn't seem to have an issue.
Theatre studies, because we are in a different, there's no ranking in junior college in after a while, and they say it's okay, stop ranking, and then the numbers have been stabilizing for the past
And it's
few years.
thriving.
Yeah, it's thriving.
Why is that?
Students, I think there's a sudden interest, because in secondary school, okay, despite the closure of O-level drama, students are then interested, okay, what can I do some more in A-levels? And A-levels, well, some colleges offer this, and then they try to branch out this course, and then eventually 4 junior colleges started when the new syllabus in 2007 was unveiled. So it was RJ, VJ, AC, and Tampines JC. So these 4 colleges offered, but because of some reason, one of the colleges closed down, and the 3 colleges started creating niche programs or niche market catchment areas of what we can develop our students. So the numbers have always been quite healthy, and it's quite exciting, as in to see. And then SOTA is there.
I have a question. I heard via another person, right, that nowadays for people to do, say, A-level theatre studies, they're not actually serious about going on to do theatre. A lot of them see it as like this is their one chance to do something very different and then go on to something else. Is that a fair statement, you think, or is that actually not true? Or
from statistics from my past graduating students, graduated students, it's true. It's true that only about 20%, 30% go into the arts, go into theatre, go into literature.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty good because
That's a
you know
good
if we're
number,
going to say if that's a poor showing, are we going to shut down the Faculty of Engineering at NTU because all of them become bankers? I mean, it just does not make sense,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
It's the learning, it's the thinking, it's the
learning.
sharpening of the thinking, not necessarily, you know, that
So
you
on
have
the
to be
school level
fit
and on the
into.
ministry level, what we are repackaging is we are repackaging how we sell the program. It's not to create industry experts. Let's leave that to the SOTA. Let's leave that to the cell. Let's leave that.
Even then, we don't do that.
Yeah.
20% is a healthy number. Most of our graduates go on to become lawyers.
Yeah.
And if you look at this, if you
Not
look at
telling
this-
the truth with a
yeah.
straight face.
And
Lying.
not all of us students are actually doing like practitioners.
I think there's a healthy group of
Yeah.
practitioners. They're
Yeah.
so healthily engaged that they're all working today and they're unable to be here.
yes.
But also, I mean, I think theater and performing arts will always be a tough field all over the world. I mean, you go to New York, you know, you study with whatever, you know, and you get out of Juilliard, and you may spend 10 years before you get anything but a TV commercial. So, you know, I think the idea that, you know, I mean, I was, as I said to Annie, I said, you know, whenever a student would say, I want to be an actor, I'd say, is there anything else you want to be? Oh, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a lawyer. I said, do that. You know, but only if they said, I have to be an actor, will I say, you know, then go on and do it.
And also, the 80% might go on to become our audiences. So
Yeah.
we need that.
Informed audience.
An informed audience who also perhaps
And become big stakeholders to make sure that this
Or, God help us, become critics, right?
It would be great if more of them become civil servants, don't you think?
I think
Yes.
so.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And actually,
So we're
can
just
I-
not fighting one side of the battle.
Yes.
Can I bring
Go
this topic
inside.
up?
To go
because
inside and fight from within.
Maybe off the subject, but something you said brought it up. And I think what I've noticed, having spent a lifetime both in theater but also in education, and I think Singapore in a way pioneered this, but the rest of the world it's happening all over the world, is this idea of quantifying everything.
Yes.
Everything is now, you know, KPIs.
Yes.
God, I never heard of that, you know. And you have to give your, you know, by the end, the students will do this, and everything has to be measured, and everything has to be calibrated. And, you know, I think in a way, I'm glad that I got out of it, in a sense, when I did, because from what I hear of people teaching, not just here, but in other countries, and it's, you know, it's basically now, they've taken a business model, the Harvard Business School model, and they've applied it to everything all over the world, including the teaching of theater.
I think it's the idea that education is transactional, that you invest in it and you expect some kind of return.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas, you know, we were having a discussion earlier that you do get the sense that when you talk to people working in the National Arts Council, or you know, at the Jasmine, there are a lot of well-meaning people with a lot of the same aspirations as the practitioners, you know, but because they're tasked, you know, with these very, very impossible numbers games of KPIs and all that, that you know, I always ask, you know, it's kind of saying, okay, Chingay last night and tonight and National Day, every time that fireworks pops, what is the KPI for that? How do you quantify that?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's that moment of magic, of awe, you know, and theatre expands that, it puts concepts and intellect into that, you know. And I don't know, I mean, does anybody ask Ministry of Finance to justify one pop of fireworks? Because that's like usually what, $500,000 each pop?
That would be under
give me the impact assessment of that.
What would that be under? Like
Fireworks?
fireworks. What's NDP celebrations under? Is that under
MINDEF.
Ah, okay.
Oh,
That's
I like
KPIs.
That's total defense.
Yes.
I think, well, on this panel, the hardest to define KPI would be poetry, right?
Yeah.
You're a
Oh,
poet.
in terms of the
What would
grant
the KPI?
applications, unfortunately, suddenly they all show up. How many books have you written? Which publication venues have you appeared in?
how many panels have you served on? And there appears to me sometimes to be this view that we assume that you're a good writer. Now let's talk about all the other stuff that you're doing, which I understand is also the exact same problem, strangely enough, faced in the scientific community. Very strangely. Everyone assumes you're a good researcher. Now let's talk about your publication history and everything else associated with that. So they're not quantifying the quality of your work at all. They're looking for some other metric. Well, that's where the metrical system breaks down, I think. Because why use these other metrics to measure work instead of looking at the work itself?
Because you can't.
Because you can't, you see.
I don't ask you how many metaphors have you used.
Yeah.
So
it's
like
a strange game.
It's like
Yeah.
this one
This usage.
essay that Miss Corrie wrote when we were in JC2, I think. She talked about the sense of wonderment. Yeah, so this word came out, and it was a buzzword in that cohort, the sense of wonderment. Then we started trying to find out from our pieces, how many sense of wonderment can we create? How many sense of wonder? Because we were so ingrained, okay, how many solutions to this answer can we get, or to this problem? Then from the artwork that we create, can we create a sense of wonderment that this Corrie mentioned earlier?
Thanks, Corrie.
Yeah. So now she has gone into critics and finding the wonderments.
The other buzzword is passion.
Passion.
We have a passionometer.
Once upon a time, it's like sublime, the sublime.
Yes.
The qualitative stuff is quite funny because I do know of things like, you know, you have to be able to count how many people show up to your show or to your exhibition. And so you end up counting even the people who wandered in who would really have no intention of looking at your show, just going to the toilet. Okay, that's two. Because it becomes more about that rather than actually what else is being done.
I have a small anecdote. So one of my best friends, who was also in the same TSD cohort, went on to be a forensic psychologist. So she works with really underprivileged children who have been abused from divorced families. She works with the Institute of Mental Health. And so she didn't go into theatre, but she recently took a course on playback theatre, right, drama therapy. And she was like, you know what, Corrie, what I'm doing every day when I'm counselling someone is to be able to put myself in that person's shoes and understand, trying to come up with a solution for that, you know. And she's like, you know, I don't think I could have done it without the theatre background that I had. And she's working in a completely different field, but what she gained and what we all gained, I think, from theatre is something that, you know, it carries over into whatever you choose to do in the future. So I think that's one thing that stays with me, that, you know, what we do is not just sort of for entertainment, or, you know, it's actually something that's bigger than that.
Which is also why I reject this idea that if out of each cohort, you know, if it doesn't cross a certain percentage of people who actually go on to be practitioners in that specific field, that is a failure. Not at all, because it's really about it's giving that capacity to process things on your own, to be, you know, creative and to be innovative in your thinking, and yeah, I think more than anything else, Singapore needs that now.
And sorry to bring up another buzzword, but one I believe in it is it's about taking risks and not knowing where it's going to end. And what I've been seeing with a lot of students, some of whom are in other fields, is that there's a risk. Life is a bit of an adventure, and whether I end up in New York, whatever, even if I'm a failure, I'm still learning. I mean, you know, Winlin had that wonderful blog where she went around the world eating. It's called Going with My Gut. I mean, and that was something that I think she wouldn't have done without TSD. And Grace, of course, who died. Remember Grace in your class?
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, anyway, she ended up with cancer in Holland. She hated Singapore. She went to Holland. She found her husband, and he loved her. And then this thing appeared on her neck, and she wrote the most beautiful book about her own death, called Pain in the Neck, it was called. And she blogged. She was one of the first people to actually blog her own death. It was beautiful, and her husband wrote the last entry. And I mean, I'm not saying theater studies should take credit for that, But I'm saying that again, it's not about making a living. It's about having a life, and maybe the life will be very long, and maybe it won't. But you know, the things that I think we've all taught and we've all appreciated is that it's really about having a life. I mean, whether you become, you know, win the Pulitzer Prize or whatever, that's not what's important. And if that leaves the course, if it becomes a pragmatic course, and there are so many people out there doing this kind of bullshit, you know, theater skills for executives, you know, and how to impress in an interview, and all of, you know, this kind of thing, right? Or even how to make money by doing musical theater, or, you know, I mean, there's all this stuff, right? And the thing about TSD right now, it's never gone there, and it could easily go there, because this is what other people think theater should be. You know, is my daughter going to be able to get into a good Ivy League college because she can impress at her interview, kind of thing, right? So I think that's really important.
If I may, I don't know what point this is, but I struggled in TSD. I think you remember this. All through first year, I'm not an actor. Okay, we tried. We were duo partners, and I remember Ms. Loxell's comment was, "This is worse than the 1960s kitchen sink drama."
Wow.
Right? I remember.
So the critic has been criticized multiple times. Yeah, we were terrible.
But and then after my year one monologue, which was what, June, midway through the course in first year, I sprained my ankle the day before my exam. And then I had to basically, postpone it a day. And then when I eventually did it, I was at the bottom of the class. I got an E. And I was ready to say, I can't do this. I can't do theater. But then I realized that if I dropped out at that point, I'd be missing out on all these wonderful people I've met. So the buzzword, right? The what? Human capital? You know, of the fact that we're all sitting here now, I think is one thing. For lack of better, like the networking we're doing, you know, even just meeting everyone. I think that's what was most valuable for me, at least, because I've always held on to that, and every theater project was about the people. I won't say never, but it was the best projects we've ever done were about the people, you know. And I'm very into this thing. Like, my work revolves around communities and how theater can sort of be the voice, or the, how do you say, like, I won't say voice, it's very bad to say I'm the voice of a community, right? But it eventually becomes sort of I like to go into a community, work with them, take their stories and put it into a piece of theater. So I've just done one with the punk community in Singapore. We did one with seniors. Khairul and I were together with this group of, everyone was at least 60 years old.
Was this ageless?
Ageless.
I saw that piece at Goodman.
Yes.
It was so good. You guys did such a great job with that. And you could tell that all the seniors were feisty people who weren't going to have you guys play them around.
At the end
but the way you guys did such a fabulous job.
At the end of every workshop with them, we were on the floor. They were still like, let's continue. I
loved it.
Can I just say that, I mean, you know, Li might have struggled during her first year, but she found it in her second year.
I was getting to that.
Yeah, sorry, do it.
Because, you know, then Mrs. Lowe and Mr. Lofthouse were like, don't give up. And if they hadn't had that conversation with me, I would have left, and I'd probably be some banker right now doing really stupid. Like, I don't know.
It's your fault.
But because I held out, when I got into the second year, we started to branch out further than acting, and I was like, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Technical theater.
So I started my career as a stage manager. But because of the devising, the original work we were doing, that's where my interest in devised theater has all come from. And you know, nowhere else, honestly, I feel the industry in Singapore doesn't have that much space for device work, or at least there are no companies who really dabble in the kind of device work we did in school. You know, I mean, I don't know.
Necessary stage.
TNS lah, yeah, I mean TNS.
Yeah.
Different kind of work lah.
They didn't even have the word devised theatre when I started.
That's true.
There wasn't even that word.
We didn't use it either. We didn't know
We
what
didn't
we
know
were
what
doing.
we
We just did it.
Went out to
Yeah,
do it.
yeah.
We'll just call it groupies.
Groupies.
Group piece.
Yeah.
But
And Li Ting went on and she did this amazing soundscape that I still remember about the Korean War. And so I still remember some of the sounds that she created with like just really
I
ordinary
put a
materials.
CD player behind the examiner.
Yes.
I had a crew member waiting to play keyboard.
Yeah, I never thought that sound design would make me cry, but that was the very first sound design piece that made me cry.
Wow,
Yeah.
awesome.
Mhm.
That sounds great.
Actually, what it sounds like is that, on one hand, one can say very practically that, of course, like theatre studies, even as we say literature can improve your English, the way your expression, blah blah blah, and just like theatre studies can give you confidence and give you, teach you how to have presence, yada yada. It sounds like actually what it really is very powerful is that for each individual is a really immediate and very personal and very powerful way of engaging with the world around you. Like all art really is, isn't it? Whether if you're a painter or you're an artist, we all find ways of engaging with the world around us. Whether we make art or we go and choose to see certain types of art or talk about art, it's a way to talk about the world and to be in the world and be with each other, right? So
I think that especially for theatre in Singapore, I think this sense of community is really important because it brings in the audience and to this moment of being present and being part of community. I think that's something that is, I would say, to some extent unique in theatre. I mean, now that I'm teaching in an art school as well, the problems of quantifying the arts, putting a value for both faculty as well as for students' work, right? It's something that's really across the board, whether we work in sound, music, and all that. So, I mean, one of the things that's different is that for visual artists, many of us have found it useful to have a second base, a different community overseas as well. But one thing about theatre is that it is very much engaged and tied to the local audience. I mean, even when a theatre company tours, I mean, it thinks about its local audience, and it always compares to the touring audience with the local audience. So these ties are very different for, I think, when we compare to other parts of community, I think.
And then what is wonderful about the TSD syllabus, the exam syllabus, because we at Singapore, we are focused on the syllabus exams, because it's so open-ended. The IS can do anything that you want, the group is can do anything that you want, and how we engage our community is how much are the facilitators, the teachers, expose our students to push, to find out what's happening around you, what's happening across the road. So 2 years ago, one of my groupies did this on the base of the two boys who got run over by the concrete cement truck
In Tampines.
in Tampines. So it was just down the road from the college, and they went around to interview the people, and they came back. They asked me, how do I go? Because I don't know how to deal with your emotions. You're all crying when you all find out about this, and I cannot. You manage your emotions first, and then find something to speak and to find a medium to express these emotions. So the problem, so now we go into how do we create a product based on an emotion. So then that's where we, the TSD program started to give them structures. Okay, you can go into physical theatre, you can go into an acting, write a good script. So this group of students who are not very articulate, very heartland, very earnest heartland. So they did a physical theatre piece where they just told the story of the two boys in movement. And it was very moving, and I thought there was something heartwarming for me as a tutor, watching them that, okay, this is what my course can do, this is what's so powerful about this thing, and I want to protect this course. It cannot close down, because it engaged the community and engaged the human soul. So that was actually very powerful.
So, because we're just running out of time now, and I think it sounds like we've all got a lot to talk about. But it sounds like that's exactly it, isn't it? This is the invisible thing about, like, what does it mean to be Singaporean? What does it mean to be in a community together? How do we deal with the things that are going to happen to us on a daily basis with each other? And sometimes there are things that we're unhappy with each other about. And how do we deal with things that are difficult that come up, And it sounds like this theatre and literature and the arts are just a wonderful way for people to be able to say what they need to say about it. So I just want to say thank you so much to Rey for coming all the way from Thailand, and thank you all of you as well for joining us and giving us your time. We will officially close here, but please carry on.